Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to see you again in today's news program. Here, we and you will share and interact with the latest news and hottest events that are of interest to the public at home and abroad. Details will be available shortly.
The joint Zapad-2025 exercise between Russia and Belarus began on May 12th at training grounds in both countries. The event took place after NATO member Poland shot down suspected Moscow drones that violated its airspace, raising tensions between Russia and the military alliance. According to Reuters, the Zapad-2025 exercise also attracted attention when on May 15th, at least 2 U.S. military officers, including Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Brian Shaw, were present in Belarus to observe. Belarusian Defense Minister Viktor Kennikov personally welcomed the 2 U.S. officers. Both shook his hand and thanked him in Russian for the invitation. Minister Kennikov said, "We will show you anything you are interested in, anything you want. You can go there, observe, talk to people." The presence of the U.S. officers was described by the Belarus Defense Ministry as unexpected. Who would have thought that the morning of the Zapad-2025 exercise would start like this? The ministry said in a statement. They also highlighted the presence of a U.S. side and representatives from 23 countries, including NATO members Turkey and Hungary, as well as China, Ethiopia, and Indonesia. The U.S. officers later declined to answer questions from the press. The U.S. military did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Meanwhile, analysts say the presence of U.S. officers is a sign that Washington is looking to warm relations with the Belarus. During a visit to Minsk last week, U.S. President Donald Trump's representative, Mr. John C., said that Mr. Trump wants to reopen the U.S. Embassy in Belarus soon, improve relations, and restore trade activities. Western analysts say Mr. Trump is trying to separate Belarus from Russia, but this strategy is considered difficult to succeed. They also do not rule out the possibility. Washington hopes to use Belarus' close ties with Russia to push for a deal to end hostilities with Ukraine. September 15th. Starlink, a satellite internet service provider owned by SpaceX, announced that it had experienced a service outage and was investigating, but did not provide further details. The incident affected tens of thousands of customers around the world, including Ukrainian units on the front line. Robert Propy, commander of the Ukrainian Unmanned Systems Force, said, "We have once again lost Starlink connectivity across the entire front line." About an hour later, a Ukrainian officer reported that connectivity was gradually restored, but did not specify the extent of the impact. Ukraine relies heavily on satellite internet systems such as Starlink, as its telecommunications infrastructure was heavily damaged during the conflict with Russia. Starlink is used by both the military and civilian sectors, becoming an essential service for hospitals, schools, and units on the front line. The last time Ukrainian units experienced problems with Starlink service was on September 24th, when connectivity was interrupted for about 2.5 hours due to a software error. Major Propy said the incident highlighted the risks of the Ukrainian military's over-reliance on systems like Starlink and called for more diverse communications and connectivity. Starlink has more than 6 million users worldwide. The service provides high-speed internet through a network of thousands of low-orbit satellites, allowing access to remote areas that cannot deploy traditional infrastructure. Since the conflict began, Ukraine has received more than 50,000 Starlink terminals from its supporters. Melina Herring, an expert at the Atlantic Council think tank in the U.S., assessed that Starlink plays an essential role in the unmanned vehicles that are one of the main pillars of Ukraine's combat operations. She warned that any disruption of Starlink's connection could be a turning point for Ukraine because the service helps the KF maintain a balance with Moscow on the battlefield.
In a recent interview with RBC Ukraine about Russian tactics on the ground, Veslub Sutenko, commander of the Unmanned Aerial Systems Battalion of the 44th Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, pointed out that difficulties in mobilizing forces are affecting the battlefield. According to Mr. Sutenko, during the conflict, Ukraine detected groups of infantry support attackers, destroyed equipment, and directly saved lives. But no matter how advanced the technology is, the human factor remains decisive. Mr. Sutenko has served in the 44th Brigade since 2023. Initially, he was the deputy commander of the battalion, living and fighting in the Kubians' direction, recalled that we defended Zinkivka and Petropavka. The UAV battalion was created in May 2024, and in May of the same year I was appointed commander. The new unit was formed on the basis of an attack UAV company, which has since evolved into a combined battalion of attack police and specialized groups. Although UAVs are widely used, close-range combat operations have not disappeared. Depending on the region and season, infantry still have to face the opponent directly. It's summer, the trees are dense, and Russia is well camouflaged. Even with dozens of UAVs, we can still miss the attack group. At that time, the infantry had to fight close with infantry weapons. There were even situations where the Ukrainian side proactively approached when it discovered Russian soldiers hiding in the gray zone. Only when Sutenko emphasized that it was not allowed to underestimate Russia. He said they also had elite units that used UAVs very effectively and were given huge resources, and more worryingly, the number of these units was increasing. According to him, Ukraine had underestimated Russia's UAV capabilities. Unlike Ukraine, where innovations in defense technology take a long time to be widely applied, Russia can quickly scale up production when it discovers effective technology. The latest example is the long-range UAV cutting off Ukraine's logistics line. Mr. Sutenko cited the Dobrpilya-Gramatop road that used to be safe, but a few months ago Russia started using UAVs to attack vehicles, making the road very dangerous. We are facing a strong opponent, and being able to fight them proves the strength of the Ukrainian army. I believe we are one of the strongest armies in the world today, he asserted. In the past month, Russia advanced 15 kilometers in the POK direction. According to Mr. Sutenko, Russia's success comes from three factors, including Ukraine's lack of manpower, dense terrain, and limited visibility. He said that no one is surprised by the lack of soldiers. The units are not enough, both infantry and UAVs. We do not have enough forces to hold every meter of the front, and meanwhile, Russia knows how to exploit blind spots in the tree beds, divide into small groups, reconnaissance, and poking. According to this person, his biggest worry is losing soldiers, and he makes every plan with the protection of troops in mind. Every sortie is carefully prepared, such as calculating safe routes, installing electronic warfare systems on vehicles, and preparing the retreat route, but most importantly, UAVs must promptly detect the enemy, preventing them from approaching the trenches where Ukrainian soldiers are entrenched. Mr. Sutenko emphasized that the balance between combat effectiveness and human safety is key.
September 15th, Deputy Chairman of the Russian Security Council, Medved, warned that Russia would prosecute any European country that tries to seize Moscow's assets. After news that the European Union is looking for new ways to use hundreds of billions of dollars in frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine. Accordingly, Reuters reported that the president of the European Commission, Ursula, wants the European Union to find a new mechanism to use the money from frozen Russian assets in Europe to finance Ukraine's defense. According to Politico, the European Commission is considering the idea of using Russian deposits, opening a new channel at the European Central Bank from the maturity of Russian-owned bonds to finance compensation loans to Ukraine. Mr. Medved wrote on Telegram about seizing Russian assets in the form of loans to Ukraine secured by Russian assets. An idea that many people in Brussels and EU countries are nurturing. If this happens, Russia will prosecute the EU countries as well as the European countries in Brussels and each EU country that is trying to seize our assets until the end of the century. The deputy chairman of the Russian Security Council warned that Moscow will prosecute the European countries by all means possible and in all possible international and national courts, as well as outside the framework of the court. Russia believes that any Western action to seize Moscow's assets is tantamount to theft and undermines confidence in the US and European bills and currencies. Referring to this issue, Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said that if the European Union dares to steal Russian assets, the consequences for the entire global financial system will be extremely negative, and anyone who participates in this crime will suffer the wrath of Moscow. We will respond strongly to any actions related to attempts to seize Russia's sovereign property. The spokesman also stressed that the Russian Foreign Ministry is taking all possible measures to protect the interests of Russian citizens and legal entities affected by the imposition of illegal restrictive measures against Russia. In a recently published interview excerpt, Pope Leo XIV was asked whether it would be practical for the Vatican to play a mediator role in the Ukraine conflict at this time. In response, the pontiff replied, "I want to make a clear distinction between the Holy See's voice in favor of peace and its role as a mediator. The two issues are very different, and playing a mediator role is not as practical as speaking out in favor of peace." The pontiff said that he is making every effort to maintain a position of not taking sides but of being truly neutral. "Some of the things I said have been interpreted in many ways, but that's okay. The exact meaning is not the focus at this time. I think some parties have to put enough pressure on the conflicting parties to say, enough is enough, let's find another way to resolve the differences." Earlier, in his first prayer after being elected as the head of the Vatican, Pope Leo XIV called on world leaders to end the fighting and establish a lasting, just peace in Ukraine. He also wanted to act as a bridge between the leaders of the warring countries to promote peace talks globally. A few days later, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, the head of the Vatican's diplomatic mission, said that the Pope planned for the Vatican to host direct talks between Russia and Ukraine. World leaders welcomed the idea, including U.S. President Donald Trump. However, the Russian leader said that Russia and Ukraine are two Eastern Orthodox countries, so negotiations cannot be held in the Catholic land of the Vatican. Both political and logistical factors are also challenges. The Vatican is located entirely within the territory of Italy, a member of NATO and the European Union. Other European countries will also have to allow planes carrying Russian officials to fly through their airspace to the Vatican.